Hey, Amy, how's it
Hi,
going?
Shane. It's going. It's going. It is officially really hot in the
Yeah,
Carolinas.
it's hot. It's hot in everywhere, but about three places in the entire country right now, for sure. For sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So it's really interesting. I am looking at something here. I just got a message from YouTube, but it says we're live.
Yeah.
Okay.
Says we're
I
live on
don't
my end too.
I don't know what's happening. So anyway, let's talk talking.
Let's
let's
chat
talk
about
let's talk
chatting.
communication.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh. All right, so I have had a couple of real wake up calls in the last, I'm going to say probably um man, Shane, probably 3 weeks. There's some things that I really realized that I um stopped doing as it related to communicating with prospects. And I started to see the numbers change. And I was like, what is changing? What is happening here? Why all of a sudden are my conversions atrophying? What is going on? And, I traced it back to one question that is in the question-based selling, process we all use in the Ascend program. And it is just simply the time expectation question. When do you want to fix this? When do you want to get started on this desired outcome you have? Well, I realized somewhere down the line, I stopped asking that question and I got lucky until I didn't.
Yeah.
So suddenly the conversions were happening, but it was taking longer and I couldn't understand why. I thought they had said they were ready to start now. Well, they never did because I didn't ask them. It was one big assumption on my part. And I realized I had made a really grievous error in my communication. So in the last few calls that I've had with prospects, I've revitalized that question, revived it, resurrected it, if you will. And it has it's just taken all the pressure off of me to really understand what their time frame is, which helps me either celebrate that they're coming in now or regrouping and saying, this isn't a prospect for today.
Yeah.
And it may never be a prospect, So then on the client side of things, I realized how important communication is when somebody steps over a boundary. So full disclosure, before I went and worked in New York City, Shane, I was a complete pushover. Okay. I would have contract labor come either into the companies that I was leading or into my own business. And they would say they were going to do something. They wouldn't follow through. And instead of going to them, I would grow frustrated and eventually the relationship would just go away. Right. I would just replace them, or they knew they weren't doing a good job and they knew I knew and we both knew, but nobody was talking about it. So they would go away, or I would grow emotionally distant, which made them uncomfortable. You know, the song and dance,
Totally.
when you are not in integrity as it comes to communication, right? You said you were going to do this. You didn't do it. Help me understand what happened. Right. Instead of having that conversation, I was just like grumbling and complaining under my breath and in the shower every morning to myself. Like, this person is really, on my last nerve. So when I went to New York, the stakes were so high that if a contractor didn't show up, Shane, it could mean like the safety of my team. We had a roof that was falling in and contractors weren't showing up, or they were showing up and leaving tools and debris on this very expensive showroom floor, and very high-end clients like A-list celebrities like Aretha Franklin coming in, Asian royalty coming in, and you have to shut down the store. And they wouldn't step in the door. with these things on the floor, okay? Or workers half in and half out of the building most of the time. So I had to learn how to say, this isn't okay, or we said this was going to happen now, but it's not happening, right? So I had a situation this week where my communication was tested with a client, right? We made an agreement. They broke the agreement on their end. And I had to circle back around and say, has something changed? And if it has, why didn't you call me? Why am I hearing from a part-time intern? Right? So the reality is that there is a way in which we can respectfully communicate both to people that don't know us, prospects, and to people that are in relationship with us, and be direct and kind and respectful and get the job done without being cold and, being labeled, all those beautiful labels, especially that they label women.
A couple of those words in my ear.
Yeah. I am very familiar with those labels that they label strong women in corporate America. And I just was like, how can I show up responsibly in my communication style and respectfully? So that's why you're going to shoot us with all of this brilliant knowledge you have. I think one of your greatest strengths is your level of communication, because everybody communicates at some level. I don't want to communicate at the bottom of the barrel. I don't want to be down with the people that either ghost you, blame you, or shame you. I want to be with the people like you that were like, okay, this is what we said we were going to do. What has happened? Or what is the expectation? Let me know what the expectation is up front, and let's see if I can match it. Right? Let's see if I can actually meet it. So how do we, as business owners, as leaders, and as people that are talking to prospects, how do we show up with responsibly and also respectfully? That's the question I have for you.
Right. Responsibly and respectfully. I like that.
Yes.
Another way to frame it is, how can I be both candid and caring?
Oh, I love that.
How can I do those two things? Because when we hear them, we're like, those have to be opposite. You're either candid or you're caring. It's like, no. You can be both candid and caring, but I think there are three things that we have to do in order for that to be lived out practically. The first thing I think is we got to count the cost before we commit in communication. That has two sides.
Yeah.
Along expectations and along confrontations. So in either case, I've got to be sure that I am counting the cost before I commit to setting an expectation. If I'm making an offer, once I am committed to that offer and verbally communicate it, like I've got to declare, I'm not going back. So if I, on the back end, like, boy, that was way too low, I should have done, like, well, okay, well, you can account the cost before your next conversation, but it's settled for this one. Count the cost before you make a commitment. On the confrontation side, no one likes being confronted, ever. Nobody likes being told, hey, you said you were going to do this, and this is what happened instead. What's up with that? Nobody likes that conversation. So count the cost before you commit to stepping in without thinking you're going to get something that is impossible, a positive reaction. You're not going to get a positive reaction. So stop searching for a positive reaction in a confrontation, and instead be the person who demonstrates that you are moving this conversation forward because you're committed to caring in a way that allows this person to maintain ownership and responsibility of what is rightfully theirs, their commitment, right? Like, so commitment is two-sided, one expectations, one confrontation. I've got to count the cost before I step in and declare on an expectation side or confront on a side where someone didn't do what I expected, right? The second thing I think is important is that we are brief, bright, and gone when it comes to communicating. Be brief, be bright, and be gone. Now, the brief part is just the facts. So on the expectation side, oftentimes, if we have an outcome that we're after, we want to influence the outcome, and we think more is better. Not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Not the case. Less is more. Be brief. Communicate what the offer is. Communicate the process you have to get to the outcome. State the price and shut up. Listen, right? Like I was classic over talker. Like I'd want to overcome all the objections in presenting the facts, right? Like, so I wasn't brief. I was expansive. And I do remember going, one for 20 some odd in my sales conversion because of my diarrhea of the mouth. Forgive me for my language. Be brief. The second part is to be bright. How can you be bright in conversation? I think you just answer 5 most important questions that anyone has when you're talking to them, and you'll be bright. If you answer what, who, when, where, and why that person you're talking to should care, you'll be bright. Because most people don't answer those questions when they're setting an expectation or when they're addressing a confrontation. They leave out. They talk about the who, they talk about the what, they leave out the when, the where, and why somebody that they're talking to should actually care about it.
Yeah.
If you can bring those forward in either circumstance, expectation setting or in a confrontation, you will get closer to someone moving towards you in that conversation than if you leave them out, because everyone is asking themselves, have they answered those 5 most important questions? They do it subconsciously. We are hardwired to want to know the answers to those 5 questions when someone asks us to do something new, something different, or change the way we've always done things. We naturally just go, what are we doing? Who's doing it? Who do I collaborate with? Where are the resources I need? How am I? All these things start going through my mind. If you answer those 5 most important ones, people will move with you. And I think the third one is maintain responsibility for yourself and to others throughout the conversation. So that starts with me setting the example. As we move into this conversation, I want to be the one who sets the tone. The way that you have set it inside the Ascend community is maintain leadership of the conversation. Whether it's client-based, prospect-based, maintain leadership. It's like, okay, I'm going to be responsible for setting the example in this conversation. If people resist when I confront, I'm not going to be moved off of confronting the facts. I'm going to stay in that posture, but I'm going to set the example of an emotional tone that allows us to solve problems together. Set the example. The second piece I can be responsible for is modeling the example. Now, I kind of gave you a little bit of insight what that looks like in a confrontation. In an expectation setting, it's being clear enough on exactly what you expect. The longer we do something, the more that we think we said it to the person we handed it off to. I would slow down in communication to be sure that you're giving all of the information that the person needs to be able to take action. Sometimes it's impossible for someone to follow through because the expectation wasn't clear. And oftentimes the leader misses when they've been unclear. So be responsible for yourself, set the example, model the example, then lead others to the example. So guide people. On the responsible to others, you're not responsible for people's feelings, but you are responsible for not being a jerk.
Yeah.
If you communicate in a way that is caring, meaning you're not name calling, you're not shaming, you're not blaming, you're not character assassinating people. If you're avoiding all of that kind of stuff and somebody gets mad, hello, guess what? You're not responsible for that. You don't pick it up, not your own. Being responsible to someone is stepping into the conversation whenever you don't get what you expect. Like, I've got to be responsible enough to you to bring forward something that didn't meet my expectation, or else you don't have the chance to learn and grow, and we don't have the chance to resolve this thing together. So I own the responsibility. If I set the expectation, it wasn't met, I don't sit around and wait for you to figure it out. I move towards you with the intention of learning. Here's one thing that I did that shifted everything for me when it came to people not meeting my expectation. Whenever somebody didn't do what I expected, I just asked myself this question: what would cause a reasonable, rational, decent human being to say they would and then not do it? What would cause a reasonable, rational, decent person to do that? There's a lot of reasons that are reasonable and rational that decent people would cause them to not follow through. I want to start there. I don't want to start with, well, they're lazy. They don't get the mission. They're never going to, I don't want to start there.
Yeah.
I want to start with the assumption this is a reasonable, rational, decent human being who's made a commitment and didn't follow through. And there must be more to the story.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think that for me, whether we're talking about, expectation setting, whether it's clients, prospects, or if it's team members, partners, whoever, or if we're talking about confronting when I didn't get something that I expected, that to me are three ways that we can frame up how to move towards people in either situation.
Yeah. It's so, oh my gosh, I hope you guys took notes. If not, just keep rewinding, because there is so much in there to turn the mirror on us as leaders and communicators and say, what am I doing? Where am I missing the mark? And one thing that is in closing that really stands out to me is how we communicate to people, is how we communicate through technology to people. Mm-hmm. So if we don't follow these 3 principles that you laid out, these 3, is principles the right word? These 3.
I haven't thought about it. I think it is. They're principle related.
Based. Yeah, they are principle based. And at the very core of those 3 things is thinking about the other person, putting ourselves in their shoes. Mm-hmm. And it just reminds me, Shane, of, you're wanting to reach people. The audience is wanting to reach people using algorithmic systems of technology. They're wanting to use Facebook. They're wanting to use LinkedIn. They're wanting to use YouTube. They're wanting to use TikTok. They're wanting to use Instagram and Twitter and email. And yet they don't understand the rules of that algorithm follow those same principles of communication. So if we don't know what the audience, what kind of communication they respond to, if we haven't really assessed ourselves against these 3 mirrors that you just gave us, and say, am I communicating like this outside of social media? Mm-hmm. Then what will happen is we will get into social media and communicate the same way. Even a digital marketer can't communicate for us if we ourselves are not solid in our communication style, which just makes the whole algorithmic world confused. Mm-hmm. So we end up getting drippy, drabby results, or we end up spending a lot of money without getting any return on investment, because that algorithm gets its direction from us. Mm-hmm. And if we ourselves are not good at communicating and are not always attending to that skill, it is a skill that must be attended to. I think this is why the rinse and repeat sales conversation with KPIs is so important, because if I assess myself just by what I'm hearing or through a recording, I'm always going to sound really good to myself. Right. But if I'm assessing my sales conversation or my client conversation with a set of numbers, I'm getting more truth. I'm really seeing who's dropping out. Where are they dropping out? They're dropping out at this point, Amy, because you're not asking the question, or you're growing frustrated because you're not in integrity. You're not convicted enough to get understanding on the expectation. Right. Yes, right. So it's the same thing as the commanders and the directors of the systems of technology within our business. They're only as good as our ability to communicate to them what we want and communicate through them what we do.
Yeah. And if the algorithm is not a mind reader.
No, it is just like your lawnmower. I mean, it really is as smart as your lawnmower. Yep. And so the lawnmower doesn't just come on out when the grass gets too high and do a thing.
Wouldn't that be awesome though?
Right? Even a robotic lawnmower, Shane, which one day, I know that there's some real nerdy people that already have those, but they still have to turn the thing on and say, go mow the lawn. Right. The lawnmower has no knowledge of what you need or want. And so that is the truth of any system, is it's only as good as the operator. So as you are assessing yourself, make sure that your assessment has numbers. Don't be afraid to get prospect input, prospect feedback. I got one of those unsolicited this week as well, which really forced me to say, maybe there's something here in my communication style that is askew. Now, granted, it was not in that message, but it was somewhere else. And because I was hyper aware of something is amiss here, then I found it. I found this question I wasn't asking. And so the natural byproduct of human assessment, our own assessment, personal assessment through the lens of truth is going to be we become better. We become better communicators, and our systems get better results for us. So in closing, as we improve our communication, don't be surprised if the results of the systems that you operate also get better. And we will look forward to the next conversation. Shane, thank you for always bringing such an incredible contribution. I mean, I learned so much on these videos with you. So I just, it's so awesome. And I'm grateful for you. I know that the community is grateful for you, and we'll carry on and talk in a few weeks.
Sounds great.
Bye.